Let's see. Okay. I think we're good to go. I moved to a new apartment, so still kind of getting used to the internet connection here and everything being set up. Let's see, just making sure our replay on Facebook is working. And it is, yay! Okay, great. Okay, so for those of you that are joining me for the first time, welcome. We do these live Q&A discussions twice a month, typically on the first and third Thursday of the month, depending. The schedule for these calls are inside your student dashboard. It will be in the introductory section of your course module. The replays are also inside your student dashboard under live events and replays. So you can check that out if you're one of our alumni students, which you are if you're here. Then you can also just hop into the Facebook group for the students, and we also have it under the guide section, which you can check on a desktop. Okay, so today we had some questions that were submitted in advance, and I try to address the questions that are submitted in advance first. But I will create moments of rest and pause in order to address what is going on inside the live space. So definitely thank you for showing up live. And we're going to make some time and space to address what might be coming up for you here together. So a couple of the questions that we got to address in advance today. If you submitted a question earlier this morning or yesterday, it probably did not make the list, but it will be top of the list the next time that we meet. So the first question, how can I tell my avoidant partner how much it hurts me when he pulls away without pushing him away further? My immediate response is to always sulk or give a snide comment. How can I fix that? I want a divorce, even if I love my husband like a sister. How can I tell him without being humiliated? Does feeling your feelings automatically lead to healing? Why is it that my avoidant partner can spend consecutive days with a friend, but can only spend one day a week with me? Can we change the dynamics of a relationship, including one with anxious and insecure attachment styles, via the law of assumption? I'm spiraling because they haven't texted me back, but I don't want to sound needy. Okay. So I'm going to dive into these questions, and if any of these resonate with you or you have your own thoughts and reflections, please feel invited to type them into the chat. And again, I will try to address them as we go along. So the first question, how can I tell my avoidant partner how much it hurts me when he pulls away without pushing him away further? Okay. So this is a little bit tricky because it can be painful when a partner pulls away and there doesn't really seem to be much explanation for it. But if we frame our language and our communications in such a way that you are the one that is causing my pain and you need to do this instead to make me feel better, that's going to perpetuate the sort of push-pull cycle, right? It's really tempting to want them to change so we can hurt less. But often the intensity of that emotional experience that we're having is deeper than just what's going on in the present moment. And there's some root of it in past wounds. Not that it's not at all about what's going on in the moment, but because of course it is, but the intensity with which we experience that pulling away is typically an echo of something earlier, deeper, and maybe even accumulated over time. So one thing to keep in mind is that avoidant partners don't want to feel overly emotionally responsible for somebody else's pain and even not for their good feelings. And telling them that you are so deeply and profoundly hurt when they pull away can actually confirm their fears and kind of reinforce the withdrawal, right? It's going to make them pull away more. They're like, yeah, see, look, you're making me entirely responsible for all your pain. I don't want that, right? So I'm right to pull away because this isn't for me. So it can help to think of it as avoidant partners really want to be chosen. They don't want to be needed. And so when you're in tremendous pain when they leave, you need them. You're communicating, I need you, but you're not choosing them, right? If you desperately need someone, you can't choose them because you need them. So it becomes a kind of conditional, contractual kind of love, and it's hard to trust the authenticity and the safety of the love that you're offering. So I would recommend you want to start by getting curious. Why do I need them? Or I'm telling myself I need them. Why am I giving so much emotional intensity to someone that's pulling away? How am I abandoning myself by chasing someone that abandons me? And I'd also have you consider getting curious about what pulling away really means in your circumstances. Is it silence for days? Is it emotional absence while you are actually spending time together? So you want to be really specific so that you can name and claim the experience very clearly, because that then offers a path to connection and avoids vague statements that sound like blame that really present no opportunity for repair or a path to connection. So with avoidant partners, we might try using what I call a soft strategy. And it's basically a strategy that expresses appreciation, acknowledges their autonomy, and also signals that you have your own self-discipline, self-control, emotional command. So for example, I really love when we spend time doing XYZ. That is what makes me really feel close and connected to you. And that kind of time is an important priority for me in relationships. What kind of things help you feel close to me? I'd really love to explore how we both can feel closer and more connected in this relationship, right? Because when you think I'm lacking this, I don't have that, they're pulling away, you're giving a lot of emotional focus and intensity to a state of lack. But lack is just an indication of something that you like, that you want, that you appreciate. So focus instead on that and allow that to be what guides the conversation. So the idea being is that now we are inviting them into a state of co-creation and collaboration instead of conflict and confrontation. Say that 10 times fast. And it shows that you are grounded in your own feelings, in your own command and control of them, whether they are difficult or positive feelings. And you're not asking your partner to manage them for you. You are inviting them to be a willing and a wanting participant in your emotional experiences. Now, given that, of course, I am not suggesting that you shouldn't hold someone accountable to the impact of their behaviors. And that gets into boundary setting and knowing the difference between expressing a boundary and a need versus giving somebody an emotional ultimatum, right? A kind of emotional blackmail. So boundaries aren't about controlling somebody else. They're about protecting your peace. Ultimatums are about controlling somebody else's behavior to get our needs met or to avoid some kind of discomfort. So a boundary basically tells someone how you're going to show up to meet your own needs and values, and it kind of extends an invitation to them to participate or not. They get to choose to be a part of that or not. So I'm not able to have this conversation if we're yelling. So I'm going to take a step back until we can talk about this respectfully. So boundaries are about you. They're not about controlling the other person. They express a kind of calm and grounded energy, and they extend a clear invitation and a choice to participate or not. Now, ultimatums are fear-based, and they try to force some kind of change in someone else to avoid your own discomfort or fear of loss or whatever it might be. So an ultimatum sounds like, unless you change or do some kind of specified thing, then I am XYZ, right? I'm completely abandoning you. I'm breaking up with you. I'm going to go off and do this, right? I'm going to ruin your whatever it is. So if you don't shut your mouth, then I'm gone for good. They are reactive. They are threat-based. They come across like an adult temper tantrum. They're focused on controlling the other person to make you feel better. There is no room for co-creative solutions. Now, add to that, your energy matters. We could argue that, well, a consequence, an ultimatum is a consequence of someone not honoring a boundary, right? So sometimes it's not the words or the actions, it's the energy with which you speak those words and take those actions. So energetically speaking, boundaries say, here's what I need and will do to stay in my integrity. Ultimatums say, you better change or else. And the difference is primarily in your emotional posture, let's say. You might wind up leaving either way, and that would be an action in support of your boundary. But whether that is an action in support of your boundary or throwing some kind of ultimatum at someone, it's all about how you leave that matters, because it's not just the words or the actions. Again, it's the energy with which you do it. Your tone, your body language, and the emotional regulation that you are capable of and carry into that boundary are just as important as your words. And they're all going to signal whether you're protecting your peace or projecting your pain onto them. Because you could say just the right thing, but you're saying it with a subtle kind of resentful or angry energy. And your partner is not going to respond to the correct words. They're going to respond to that inner eye roll that you've got going on, right? So a few affirmations I thought I might offer to embrace our boundaries. I'm not pushing them away. I'm pulling myself into integrity. Saying yes to myself is not saying no to you. It's inviting you to know the real me. And when I honor my boundaries, I create space for you to move towards me, right? So if you want more assistance in clarifying your boundaries, we talk a lot more about this in the Courageous Communicator program for those of you that have that course. Otherwise, I do have a free downloadable guidebook that will walk you through a 10-question assessment for your boundaries and a 5-step process to help you pinpoint, articulate, and uphold your boundaries. And basically, we do this by formulating what I call red and green flag statements so that you can better recognize when your boundaries are being encroached upon, right? Or when you may need to articulate those. And I will just pop that in the chat right there. Okay. Good question. So that was question 1. Let's move on to the next question. And before I do that, for those of you that are here or joining me live, can you relate to this question? Have you ever struggled with understanding what is the difference between an ultimatum and a boundary? I would love to know that, if any of this is resonating with you here. Okay, so question number 2. My immediate response is always to sulk or give snide comments. How do I get past that? Okay. So sulking or giving snide comments is really a form of passive aggression. And that is a way that we try to exert our power when we actually feel unsafe in being more direct. So this can usually stem from a deeper held belief that our real power is either destructive or unacceptable for whatever reason. So maybe you learned that expressing what you really think and feel results in some form of rejection or conflict or punishment. And so instead, we wind up protecting ourselves by withdrawing and using these kind of indirect jabs to signal our inner upset or distress. And that allows us to kind of keep our own vulnerability and underbelly protected, right? Or even hidden. But passive aggression, because of that, passive aggression keeps us kind of stuck like a record scratch in a loop of powerlessness, assumed powerlessness. And so in order to shift that, we need to reconnect to our own sense of inherent power and really examine the beliefs that we are carrying around. What does it mean to express anger, to assert our needs, and even set our boundaries? And so that journey often leads to really confronting our relationship to our own aggression, right? To aggression itself, and how we learned to suppress or perhaps mischannel it. So instead of defaulting to things like sulking or sarcasm, you might try experimenting with clear, calm truth-telling. And so, for example, that might sound like, Well, that comment was really hurtful and it felt disempowering to me. In order to move forward and feel more considered in this relationship, I would need you to XYZ, right? So things that would make you feel respected, that would feel like your power was being acknowledged and you were being treated like an equal, that would make it feel safe for you to articulate what it is that you really think and feel. What are those things, right? And so you might feel kind of surprised to see how effective it can be to speak more plainly, because it's going to allow you to inhabit your power more comfortably. And that exudes an energy of being in command of yourself rather than hiding behind passive aggressive jabs, right? That's what's going to allow you to really sit in your power. And that can shift the entire trajectory of a relationship. This is why I say with my courses, like the Courageous Communicator, for example, is that we can learn to say all the right things at the right time, and it's going to mean nothing if we're not processing the emotional energy behind the words. This is also why I say that when we start tweaking our language and communication, it is a form of trauma healing, because as we go through the processes of reformulating the way we express ourselves, we're actually changing the patterns of energy in our bodies. We're changing the way in which we organize that energy, right? It's a twofold process, which is why, in the Courageous Communicator course, we do talk about language, but we also talk about, and where does that word fall in your body? And where's the energy coming from? And what color is it? And what shape is it? And how big, how much space does that occupy inside of you? And if we were to pull that out of your body and talk to it, what words does that energy have to say? And what do we need to acknowledge about that before we can say the right words and have it really mean something for you, instead of feeling like you're faking it until you make it, right? So I hope that was helpful. We have a question. Hi, Mary. How do you get past trying to be invisible in order to be safe from the past to now be visible? So I would say that's probably a similar process. Being safe means trusting your power, right? Being safe means trusting your resiliency. Being safe means trusting your capacity to make discerning decisions to curate the environments that you move through and the people you surround yourself with, right? Because of course, there are people who are unsafe. There are environments that are unsafe, but we can adopt a trust in ourselves to make good choices about the people we connect with, about the environments we move through, right? So it's about developing self-trust. And then once you start developing that self-trust, you connect again to your power, you connect to your resiliency. And to my mind, that's a transcendent assignment. That's a spiritual assignment, which is, what guides the sort of prevailing premise under all of the courses that I offer: communication, attachment 101 courses, the soul attachment courses, is that as we start to relate to others in a way that feels more evolved and more expanded and more conscious, it's an equal and opposite process of relating to ourselves more deeply, right? Great question. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so that was question number 2. Question number 3. Let's see. I want to get a divorce, even if I love my husband like a sister. How can I tell him without being humiliated? Okay. So first off, sending you big hugs and empathy for being at that crossroads in life. I'm divorced and remarried, but I deeply, deeply remember that experience. And it's not easy, but it was for me a catalyst into this work, right? It was for me a catalyst in my life to really look at myself and peel back all the layers of hurt and different narratives I had been carrying for decades, and start to peel back those layers like an onion and find grace on the other side. So I want to just start by saying that that's the frame with which I address this question. Now, when we are fearful of humiliation, particularly in divorce, it is, covering up or masking or expressing a deeper struggle that we may have with the shame that we're carrying around that, the sense that ending the marriage equals failure. So I might reframe that to say ending the marriage might be a graduation, right? It might be the completion of a lesson and a graduation into a new curriculum for you. It certainly was for me. And you said you loved your husband like a sister. I'm still in good relationship with my ex, who is my co-parent. Our relationship's better now than it was when we were married, and that is because we were in the wrong roles. We have a life partner contract together, but our roles were misaligned. So he's still someone that's gonna most likely be in my life forever. He's the father of my child, but we were wearing the wrong suits for our jobs, right? And so now that we're in the right suits, our relationship, the unspoken relationship contracts that we have with the people that are close to us, they get revised and they get molded to the correct alignment, right? So maybe I want to offer a little piece of hope there, that if you love this person like a sister, you probably want them in your life in a capacity that feels more correct, right? More aligned. So it doesn't mean you have to lose them. You might have to lose them for a little while until that can correct itself. And there might be some shame in that, but shame is just a part of that process. And it's not likely that you will be able to bypass that, because divorce forces us to face our own internal stories about our worthiness, about success, about our identity and who we are, as well as all of the expectations that we've absorbed from others. Marriage is a very public contract, right? As much as it is an intimate one. And so it's really not just the end of a relationship. It's going to be a shift in how you've been seen, known, and defined, how you do that to yourself, and also how others maybe see, know, and define you as well. And so that's why it can be really painful, but also profoundly catalytic and transformative. And so you may still love your husband, just not in a way that supports a marital bond. It doesn't make you wrong, right? It just means the nature of that love and that contract has changed. And you don't need to be cruel or cold in order to be clear. You just have to be strong enough to tell the truth, even if it shakes things up, and know that it will. And know that you and this person will survive it. So that might sound like, the nature of our love has changed for me, and to be authentic and in my integrity, I can no longer continue in this married state. Our relationship contract has to change, whatever that looks like moving forward, right? And then, of course, invite them to be a part of that conversation, be willing to hear and listen and understand the impact that your decision is going to have on them, and just hold it. Even if the shame comes up, even if the sadness comes up, even if anger comes up, just hold it, because it's okay for them to be angry at you. It's okay for you to feel guilty or shameful. All of those are completely normal and appropriate feelings for the situation. And you can hold that, and you can have those feelings and still know that this love doesn't support the marital bond anymore. It's okay. This is just part of the evolutionary process. And so that's kind of standing in your truth, but holding compassion as well. And it's not going to be easy, but you can make it a loving step for both of you. Right. So I hope that that was helpful. That was question number 3. Let's move on to question number 4. And again, before I move on, just if any of this is resonating with those of you that are here with me in the live space, I'd love to see that there in the chat. Or if you have any questions or reflections coming up, I will take moments of pause to address what may be coming up for you here in the space. Okay, so this was the question that I sort of titled today's segment around, because I really kind of love this question. Does feeling your feelings automatically lead to healing? Okay, so in a nutshell, it depends. Not necessarily. I think that feeling your feelings with intention leads to healing. And that includes setting the intention to feel your feelings in their raw, unprocessed, unrefined state without intention for a period of time, to give them that space for there to be no directionality, right? To be no intentionality. But then there has to be a container for that. So this is why it's kind of paradoxical, right? But sometimes we can think that simply emoting, crying, venting, raging, that means that we're doing the work, we're processing the feeling. But if we're just venting our feelings, it's sort of like you're in a car on a hot summer day and the windows are closed and it's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter and the temperature is rising. And so you roll down the window and the heat goes out. Ah, what a relief. And then you roll the window back up and you let it steam again, right? That's just venting. That's just feeling your feelings with no intention to change what's going on, right? So you haven't learned how to turn on the air conditioner. You haven't moved the car to a spot in the shade. Nothing has happened. So you're just going to stay in that pattern. Roll it up, roll it down, roll it up, roll it down, fill it up, relief, fill it up, relief, and nothing changes, right? So what can happen is if we just start reveling, stewing in our feelings, then we become stuck, we get swamped, or even addicted to the emotional charge. And we start to identify with the pain instead of learning how to evolve it, alchemize it, whatever word, integrate it, whatever word you want to use. So I believe that feelings are messengers. They carry information. They are not meant to be put in charge, but they are also not meant to be ignored. And so when we let our feelings take over, we become impulsive, we become anxious, we become emotionally immature or lost in things like depressive spirals. We can feel like we are a victim of life and we are being pushed around by our circumstances. On the other hand, when we disown our feelings and we try to escape to the head or escape to our intellect as a way to avoid them, now we become cold. We are over intellectualized. We get pinched off from the sensuality and the visceral quality of our experience. We start trying to think our way around life instead of feeling our way through it. And because of that, we lose connection to a sense of meaning and purpose. Additionally, our embodied experiences don't really inform our consciousness anymore, and or our big thoughts can't make their way down into the material world. We get stuck in a world of ideas and we're not able to really bring it into our material reality. So in order to heal that kind of gap between the head and the body, right, or the head and the heart, or to bridge that, to heal that, we have to develop a relationship to our feelings. We have to listen to what each emotion is trying to show us. And so when we remain open to receiving that message, whether it is a message from joy or grief or rage or delight, if we welcome that information with a kind of reverence, now we start to bring the parts of ourselves into wholeness, right? The parts of ourselves that hold those feelings, which in the self-help lingo, we might say our inner child or our inner critic or the different, parts of that are holding these feelings. We start bringing that into a sense of wholeness and integration with what I'm going to call the spiritual self and the sovereign self, right? The sovereign self being a flexible ego, the spiritual self being your higher knowing or the transcendent part of you that has a moon's eye view of your life and everything in it. And so once we're able to do that, we realize that all feelings are worthy, right? Feelings are not positive or negative. Feelings are messengers. They can carry important information, right? Some messages feel better than others, but that's only because of the quality of the message they carry. And if we can stop disowning our pain and worshiping our pleasure, and instead listen to all of our feelings as these kind of sacred messengers of our inner world, now we start to align with that spiritual self. We start to experience the transcendent in everyday life, in our routine lives. And that's what I consider to be inhabiting soul-centered security, when we're operating from that place of true connection, inner alignment, and groundedness. So I hope that helps. That was question 1, 2, 3. That's the end of question 4. And I see we have some other questions. I'm glad you like that, Mary. I need to view this a few times, especially since I'm currently grieving losing my grandma 2 days ago. Oh, that's very difficult. I'm sorry to hear that. A lot of the cases seem more relevant for those already in a partnership. Being single, I don't know how to establish boundaries with an avoidant partner when it seems inappropriate. Well, the nature of the boundaries that you're establishing are going to be different, right? So can you give me an example of a boundary you would like to establish with a partner? And I can see if I can help you out with that. I'm dealing with pet loss and breakup at the same time and having a hard time dealing with all of the emotions that are coming up. Any guidance on how to process through the emotions? So I originally got into talking about attachment by writing a book called about complicated grief. So it's called Attachment, Art Therapy, and Complicated Grief. And so grief is a process of undulation. It is moments of being with the grief, sitting with the loss, considering where's the loss coming from? Where does that feeling live in my body? What are the stories that loss is telling me now about what the loss means for me? Are parts of myself gone and I'll never recover them? Are the feelings I had when I was with them, do those feelings disappear now? And how do I start to call that back, right? So this is moments of engagement. I have a course called Healing Complicated Grief with Creative Arts Therapies. It was the first course I ever wrote. And it still exists on my Creative Arts Therapies online website. Maybe I can find a link and offer that. So that really takes you through a 6-step protocol and curriculum for how to process grief, particularly complicated grief. So complicated grief is like, it's unabating. It feels endless, right? It feels like it's like it will never go away. And even treatments for things like depression don't help. It's treatment resistant. It's just an endless grief that feels like it will never go away. But I like to think of it as like complicated grief is kind of like when you feel as though normal grief is mourning the loss of something you had and now feel like you won't have again. Whereas complicated grief is kind of mourning the loss of something that you never had and now you struggle to feel like you ever will. And sometimes when we assign we wind in loss, we assign parts of ourselves to the thing that we've lost. And so part of it becomes, again, kind of a spiritual assignment to recover that for yourself and realizing that nothing is ever really lost. It's always there. I'm going to pop a link in the chat. So that's the link in the chat is for grief. Healing complicated. Oh, is that the right one? Yeah. Ignore the picture, that's the wrong picture. But the curriculum, the link is correct. It's for a course on complicated grief. Bezam, I might need, oh, I see. I sent it to Bezam directly. Okay, now it should be in the chat. But basically, it's a pendulum swing. So there will be periods of engagement, but then it's important to give yourself periods of rest. So engaging with the loss feelings, the grief feelings, and then giving yourself a distraction, something else to do. Reminding yourself of what do I find pleasurable in this lifetime? What do I enjoy doing? What connects me to my sensuality? Because that's going to pull you back from, things like sometimes we can have fears about if I'm happy, then I'm not honoring the thing I lost, right? If I allow myself to move on and experience enjoyment again, then I am betraying the love that I had. I'm just speaking sort of archetypally here. But, particularly with pets tend to offer unconditional love. And so in those cases, if we lose a pet and we feel really bereft about having lost a pet, now the universe is kind of giving you this opportunity to confront our feelings around unconditional love. And what are the stories that we have around that? And pets are wonderful, wonderful therapists. Pet therapy is a thing for a reason. They are wonderful little spirits and entities in this world that are guiding us in interesting and important and profound ways. So definitely I would honor the loss of a pet as much as I would the loss of a loved one, and give yourself time and space to grieve. You know, there's also a lot of advice around grief, which is just not helpful. Throw yourself into work. Oh, you know, in relationships, oftentimes it's like, you know, well, the best way to get over someone is to get under somebody else, right? Sometimes if it was I think someone had mentioned a grandmother, if there was a love that was offered through someone like an older grandparent or parent or something, that there may have been gifts we got from them that we didn't get from our immediate parents, or there may have been a type of love that we received that was hard to feel and experience in other ways. And so now it may be that there's a challenge to find ways to experience that in new and transcendent ways, in a more expanded way for yourself. And so grief becomes a catalyst for all of that. So yeah, Baisam, would you mind sharing that link in case it's in the Facebook group as well, just in case someone wants to check out that course. But it's a six-part course. Let me see if I can tell you. Yeah, so the curriculum I typically have for working through grief is confronting the myths that we carry around it, right? Well, it's been 6 months, you should be over it by now, right? Well, grief should only last half as long as you were with the person, right? Erroneous, none of that matters, right? Then also looking at shifting from being swamped by the emotion to setting the intention. So what intention do I have for working through this grief, right? And being intentional about it instead of feeling like you just got hit with a, you know, truck full of bricks. You got to let yourself feel that, but also be aware of what, not be aware of, but maybe setting the intention around how you want to hold that grief and how you want to work with it in your life. Also becoming aware if you are engaging in any kind of short-term escapes. So as I said before, it's a pendulum swing. It's periods of engagement and then it's periods of distraction and rest. And this means that, you know, growth and processing happens at the edge of your comfort zone, not all the way outside of it, because you throw yourself in the deep end, you're just going to go running back to the middle of your comfort zone, because that's just going to re-traumatize you. But it's right at the edge. So giving yourselves periods of rest or distraction so that you can come back and process the grief feelings is totally normal and it's healthy. When I say you want to avoid short-term escapes, that's like, I'm going to drink myself to sleep every night. I'm just going to gorge on Ben and Jerry's and Netflix so that I don't have to think about anything. Like, there are certain things we can do for distraction, but don't allow it to become habitual, right? Because then what happens is you wind up corking the grief and it just builds and it becomes like a knot in a tree, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the messenger is going to keep knocking until you answer the door. Then taking a look at, is there more here, right? So what are the historical stories I'm tying to this loss, and are there any other connections? So I started looking at grief because I broke up with a boyfriend that I'd only been dating for probably like 9 months. And the grief that I felt was deeper than the grief I had over my marriage, which was a 7 and 8 year relationship. And I was like, why am I grieving so much over this like candle that burned brightly but a short amount of time? And at the same time, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. My brother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, all in a six-month time frame. I had 2 aunts die that I was very close to. And I'm like, I have all these other attachment things that are being called into question. And the thing I'm focusing on is this 9-month relationship. So I had to look at the bigger picture in the context of my life and realize like I was pinning a lot of content and emotional intensity on this because it was probably safer to do that than looking at all these other things that had actually accumulated at that point in my life for about 35 years, right? So we have to look at the history of loss Is there something cumulative going on here that's actually coming from another bucket, so to speak? Then looking at, are there limiting beliefs that may be driving this grief? Connecting to love and spirit. So if you're here, you know that I like to approach these things from a spiritual perspective. So connecting to what is your spiritual understanding? Looking at themes of forgiveness, if any of that applies in your situation, and then exploring experiences of transcendence. And in my work, we do that through guided visualizations, creative arts therapies, exercises, and somatic work, right? So that was the sort of overall curriculum that I developed for that. So I encourage you to check that out if you're interested. I hope that was helpful. And check our chat here. Okay, back to the question about being single and setting boundaries. They don't follow through on what they say they'll do in terms of communication, such as sending promised photos after a phone conversation or showing up to previously agreed upon meetings. And it doesn't seem as though I have any grounds to enforce a boundary when we aren't in a relationship. It seems like there's nothing I can do other than work on myself. Expressing disappointment or asking for anything at all, no matter how fair, seems inappropriate when we're not yet dating. Of course it's appropriate. You're a human being and you have time. And we all have a precious resource called time. And we all have a precious thing called our schedule and our calendar. And you don't need to be dating to set a boundary with anyone to respect your time and your calendar. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, hey, hey, you mentioned sending some photos. Haven't received them yet. Would love to check them out. That sounds like an ADHD moment, honestly. So sometimes just a follow-up. And then if they still don't respond, that's going a little bit deeper. But not showing up to agreed upon meetings, no. Once, okay. Twice, no. So now you say, hey, so-and-so, I really like connecting, and I find myself wanting to connect more regularly. But when we set a meeting, when we've set the last X number of meetings, you canceled or didn't show up to 2 out of 3 of them. And for me, that encroaches upon my time. And my time is really important to me, and I put a place of high value on how and with whom I spend my time. So in the future, if you want to set up a meeting, I need reassurances that you will be there. And that includes a confirmation message an hour before we're supposed to meet, right? I do that with everyone, right? You don't need someone to be in a relationship with you to ask for that. In fact, I would recommend doing this before you're in a relationship with them, because now you're stuck with someone who doesn't respect your time, right? I hope that's helpful, because now, not okay. Okie dokie. Feelings and healing. Okay, so that was question 1, 2, 3. That was question 4. So we got 10 minutes left. Let's see how many we get through. Question number 5. Why is it that my avoidant partner can spend consecutive days with their friends, but I can only get 1 day with them per week? Okay. So it can feel really confusing and even painful when you have a partner that seems completely capable of spending quality time multiple days a week with someone that is one of their friends, but then it seems like they intentionally restrict or limit their time with you to just 1 day a week, right? In this case. So it's important to understand that the emotional energy required in a romantic relationship, I'd say across the board, but particularly true for an avoidant partner, that energy is for them fundamentally different than from a friendship. That's why we call them intimate romantic relationships, because they come with an extra level of emotional closeness, vulnerability, right? And a mutual expectation of certain needs getting met that friendships do not. And so for avoidantly attached partners, friendships can feel recharging for them because it is a place where they can show up without the pressure of having to be emotionally contributory or responsible for someone else's feelings on that extra level of investment. And they don't have to work towards that deep, intimate level of attunement because it's not necessarily something that comes second nature to them. Now, in contrast, romantic relationships can sometimes feel draining for them, not because you're doing something wrong, but because the closeness kind of activates the internal narratives that they carry around connection. So whatever their internal narratives are around relationships, right? The wounds that they carry, fears of failure, fears that you're expecting too much or that you're demanding too much or you want more than they have to give, like that sort of prevailing, pervasive narrative that they carry, unconscious fears that they're not going to be able to meet you where you're at or what you need, and they haven't really learned yet how to show up and regulate themselves well enough to be attuned to you so that it doesn't feel draining. So if they're only spending 1 day a week with you, that tells you something about their capacity already. Doesn't mean that they're not interested, willing, or wanting to expand, grow, or evolve that capacity or that relationship, but they are telling you something about where the capacity is right now. Okay. So there's a certain 1 day a week indicates a certain rhythm and pace and frequency with which they're going to be able to achieve that over time. And you're going to have to kind of come to your own conclusions about how comfortable you are with that. You know, how much does this person in this relationship meet the needs that you have in general around relationships, and how compatible is that in comparison to what they clearly need and want. So your desire to want to spend more time together is healthy and valid and normal, but your partner may unconsciously associate romantic closeness with some degree of pressure, a loss of their own independence, or a fear of failing to meet your needs, right? And those are the deeper attachment wounds going on and that are at play. And they're not necessarily your fault, but looking at and really naming the difference in how intimacy is experienced for you versus how it's experienced for them might open up the door in a conversation for understanding whether this is a connection that's really going to be able to meet you where you're at. Because he's given you a lot of good information. I mean, the other thing too is like a person has history with their friends, right? They know them. They've already done that work. If you're just starting to date someone and they're seeing you once a week, you haven't done that work yet, right? And sometimes, avoidant partners, they are slow to warm up. Whereas if you find yourself being of a more anxious disposition, they're very fast, right? So it can feel like rejection if you are somewhere on the extreme end of the anxious spectrum. But, slow to warm up exists on a spectrum of secure people can be slow to warm up all the way, over to avoidant people being slow to warm up. So it's really going to be a conversation between the two of you, and you got to be very clear on what it is that you need and want. And you also got to be able to say, this is not for me. Right. So I hope that helps. That was the end of question 5. Let's do question 6. So this is question 6. I think we might get through all of them today. Okie dokie. Can we change the dynamics of a relationship, including our anxious avoidant dynamics, through the law of assumption? Okay. So the answer is yes. For those of you that don't know or haven't heard of it, the law of assumption is essentially, it's kind of a blend of cognitive behavioral therapy and self-fulfilling prophecies. So it's the idea that what we assume to be true about ourselves, others, and our relationships kind of becomes the lens through which we see and respond to the world, and therefore shapes the way we experience reality. So let's bring this into a more practical space. So let's say we have an avoidant partner, and they carry this unconscious assumption that romantic partners eventually will want too much, need too much, or ask for more than they have to give. And with that belief comes an expectation that they will either lose themselves trying to meet those needs or fail and be rejected. But there's another part of them that also longs for love and connection. So let's say they wind up in a relationship anyway, and it feels like things are going good for a while. The honeymoon phase feels pretty awesome, and they're able to kind of sustain that for a period of time. Hang on one second. And so 3 to 6 months go by, and the attachment system activates and it turns on. And without any warning, they start pulling away, not because their partner did anything wrong, but because their inner narrative is predicting failure. And so now the partner who hasn't been demanding, wasn't anxious or overbearing, is suddenly confused and hurt. And their avoidant partner's abrupt distance makes absolutely no sense. So they start reaching for answers. They start getting anxious, and maybe they become more reactive. And the avoidant partner says, see, I knew that would happen. But the truth is they induced that reaction. And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. This would be the law of assumption, right? It works the other way too. Let's imagine we have an anxious partner who's been cheated on a lot. And so they carry that wound into the next relationship, and now they're hypervigilant, checking phones, suspicious of passwords, constantly asking for reassurance. Now let's say that their new partner, who has been faithful and hasn't given any reason to spark distrust, eventually becomes confused and even offended by the constant inquisition. And so over time, they start wondering, are they projecting onto me because they're being unfaithful? Or maybe they think, well, I'm already being treated like the bad guy. Maybe I should just go out and do what I'm already being punished for. And so in psychoanalysis, this is what we call the projected introject. The partner has absorbed the anxious person's projection and become what they are being accused of. Again, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's the law of assumption. It's all the same thing. But this is kind of the kicker. The law of attraction also plays a role here. So someone who has been cheated on is more likely to attract another cheater, not because they deserve it, but because they are energetically preoccupied with it. That emotional intensity, the hyper-focus, the fear, the obsession becomes a kind of energetic beacon or lighthouse. And we start attracting more of what we carry emotionally. And this applies to the avoidant partner as well. If they expect that their partner is going to be too demanding, they're more likely to attract someone on the extreme end of the anxious spectrum who has demanding traits. The law of attraction at work. And so now we have confirmation bias, right? But even if it's this, in this case, let's say, but even if the avoidant partner attracts someone who's relatively secure, if the emotional intensity tied up in their insecure beliefs is strong enough, as we demonstrated, they can induce the thing that they're trying to avoid. And now we're back to the law of assumption again, right? So the takeaway here really is change the way you think and react, and that's how you're going to change your reality. Okie dokie. So that was, I think, question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's see. My son is coming home from school, so I just got to make sure he's not here yet. Okay. One more. We got 2 minutes. Let's see if we can get through the last one. I noticed when I'm in a relationship, I ended up dropping my stuff, friends, family, time, and gym. How would I work on this? So this is really about making sure that you're staying grounded in who you are. And you want to think about, if I were doing my own thing right now, what would I be doing? And make sure that you're choosing yourself each time, right? So if normally on a Wednesday, when you're not in a relationship, you would go to the gym and take your class. When you get into a relationship, keep going to that class on Wednesdays. And just have this person become an addition to your life. And then the relationship will evolve, because all things evolve with increasing increments, right? Everything evolves. Nothing stays static. Nothing stays the same. As it evolves, you can start to integrate them into that calendar and find out what spaces remain just mine and what spaces are shared. And I'll create firm but flexible boundaries around those spaces so that it doesn't become lopsided. Right? Okie dokie. One last question, and then we'll close this for today. I'm spiraling because they haven't texted back, but I don't want to sound needy. Okay. So this one's a little bit complex. Let me see if I can. I did an answer. I answered one like this recently, and I had a good way of saying it. Sometimes I have like I channel stuff and it's like, oh, that was good, and then I don't remember it. Okay, here we go. I have some notes on this one. So when we have this idea of being needy, right? So needy is a judgment that we place on ourselves. Needy is not really a feeling. It's a self-critique. And it's usually based on a fear of rejection or abandonment or judgment and so on. So when we tell ourselves that I'm being needy or I'm being too needy or I don't want to be needy because they haven't texted back, we're already judging our desire through someone else's imagined perspective. And that's going to pull you out of your grounded self, right? It's going to pull you out of your center. And it's going to disconnect you from what you truly want and need around connection, communication, and relationships in general. And it's going to throw you into self-doubt because you're not in your center anymore. And that's a problem because now you're going to start disowning, devaluing, dismissing your own needs and desires. And you're going to tell yourself it's unsafe to express that desire. So you suppress it. And then you look to the outside world of this person to decide if what you feel is okay. So it boils down to trusting yourself more, right? And to just trusting the idea that your desire is worthy of being expressed regardless of however it is received. Right? People will say, well, what's the point of talking about it? Because it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to change their mind. The point is self-advocacy. The point is expressing it because you are here and you take up space and you need to hold that space, right? So what if expressing your desire wasn't about getting a response? What if it wasn't a strategic move? What if it was more about tuning into whether this relationship is right for you or not? And that puts you right back in your center. I'm not running around trying to be what you need and want me to be. I'm choosing whether you are the right person for me. And that's what boundaries are for. It's not about controlling how somebody else responds or somebody else's emotional life. It's about noticing your needs and seeing if the connection supports them. So it might sound something like, hey there, you've been on my mind. I hope you're well. It's been a while since we've talked and I've missed that connection. I would like to stay in touch more regularly. I'm wondering what you think about that. No pressure, no chasing. You're just being honest. You're being grounded in the way you're communicating. You're leading with clarity because the goal is not to get a perfect response. The goal is to honor your desire and let that be enough. So instead of calling yourself needy, what if you could express yourself without guilt, fear, or tiptoeing around them? Right? So that, I think, would be the assignment that I would give you. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for staying. I appreciate those of you that joined me here in the live space. It's nice to have you here. And for those of you who are sharing questions, it's always good to know what's on your mind. We will be back towards the end of the month. I think April 17th is our next call. But I will send out reminders the day before, the day of, and then for those of you that have access inside your student dashboard, you can always ask me questions in advance through the link inside your dashboard, and the replays will be there as well. Thank you, everyone. I've enjoyed seeing you here today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.